Hey everybody, welcome to my video about hiking the Volcan de Acatenango in Guatemala. I just got back a few days ago and honestly I couldn't wait to wrap up this video. I'm still blown away from the beauty of this place, and the fact that you somehow ended up here probably means that you're looking for some insights or personal information about that hike and specifically how hard it is. And I want to give you exactly that, my personal experience from the beginning all the way to the end. And to do so, let's jump right back to where it all began. It all started when I did some research in the Facebook backpacking groups, what I usually do, and I somehow came across this guy, Erson, a guy that, as it turned out after multiple weeks of conversing with him, shared my passion of hiking and outdoor activities. So we somehow came up with the idea, hey, why not hike the volcano together? He offered, I accepted, and it was the best thing I could have ever done. Not only was it convenient because he knew that place inside and out, he also did this like about 100 times, so he knew everything about the place. And I'm not exaggerating, he did this about 100 times. He even ran the freaking volcano a few times. So on May 15th, 2023, it was finally time to meet. Hey amigo! ¿Qué tal?
¿Cómo estás?
We immediately made our way to stock up water and food for the next day. Trying to pack lightly, we focused on smaller items such as power bars, trail mix options, or salty snacks. Once we were done, we moved on and had dinner. After all, we just met for the first time and there was a lot to talk about. While we were waiting for the food, Erson passionately explained to me the different stages of the hike and which would probably be the most challenging stretches of the trail. And while he was explaining all of that to me and the food came, I noticed that something felt off. I didn't have appetite, which for me is weird because I'm a guy that can eat all day long. And sure enough, 2 hours later I found myself throwing up from food poisoning. Worst timing ever. We got to Erson's apartment and I passed out at about 8 p.m. At 3:30 in the morning, my alarm went off. And I was conflicted. I still felt really weak and I wasn't sure if I should or could attempt such an intense hike with less than 100% of my fitness level. But I needed to make a decision. This was the only day we could do the hike. I came all the way to hike that volcano. And so I decided. And I decided to get up and get ready. I pulled myself together, took a shower, charged all my devices, packed the backpack, and 1 hour later we left the house, ready for the adventure of a lifetime. As the sun was peacefully rising in the east, we slowly made our way out of the busy streets of Guatemala City. I slowly started to feel a little better, a little more alive. Not perfectly fine, but I was okay. One last thing we needed to do was getting some money to pay for the fees inside of the park, which can only be done in cash. So we stopped at an ATM. Once we did that, we hopped back in the car and continued our 1.5 hours long drive to La Soledad, a small town from where the official hiking trails start. Not only did Erson share my passion for outdoor activities, he also loves 80s rock music. Consequently, we had a little sing-along in the car, which was a lot of fun. And then we arrived La Soledad. We actually passed by the actual entrance of the hiking trails, which gave me a little glimpse of what was waiting for me. We parked the car in a small area besides the road and met the guy that would hand us over the key to our little cabin located somewhere up on the volcano mountain. More importantly, he explained to us how exactly to find that cabin, which turned out to be not quite as easy as we thought. Once we figured it out, we walked back up the street for a minute and finally started the hike. At around 6:30, we officially entered the first zone of the trail, the Farmlands. To be honest, this part is quite boring since it simply leads alongside some local farms with not much to see. Although the path itself is pretty even at that point, it consists of rich soil, which partly makes it quite hard to move on, especially in combination with the 25 to 30 degrees incline. After just a few minutes, we turned around and stopped. I was surprised to see how much elevation we already gained in such a short amount of time. After only half an hour, we reached a small rest area which offers food, drinks, primitive restrooms, and the infamous I Love Acatenango sign. We stopped here for about 20 minutes and moved on. In my opinion, this is where the real adventure actually started. we now entered the transition zone between the farmlands and the second zone called the Cloud Forest, which, at least during our hike, very well deserved its name. As soon as we entered the Cloud Forest, everything changed. First of all, the already steep incline immediately got a lot steeper.
This is fucked up.
Secondly, the grounds were uneven and sometimes pretty tough to walk on. And lastly, I definitely started to feel the elevation gain. It got colder, it got a little windier, and it got harder to breathe as well. Besides all of that, I personally really enjoyed this part because of its scenery that looked beautifully tropical. After another 45 minutes of hiking, we reached the official entrance of the park. At this point, the entrance fee needed to be paid and a registration form needed to be filled out. After another 20 minutes of rest, we moved on, deeper and higher up into the Cloud Forest. After a total of 3 hours of steep incline hiking, we reached a small wooden cabin, peacefully nested within the deep green jungly forest of the Cloud Forest zone. This would be the last official opportunity to purchase drinks or food along the way. So, given my overall not ideal state of health, I decided to get myself 2 instant chicken noodle soups, which immediately warmed me up from the inside and made my stomach feel much better as well. Once we moved on, the temperature now started to significantly drop down as we reached an altitude level of 3,000 meters. After a total of 6 hours of hiking, we reached another feast station, located right at the second transition zone. We now left the Cloud Forest and entered the third zone, the high and sub-alpine forest. At this point, we needed to increase the frequency and length of our rest stops and decided to take a bigger break as we left the Cloud Forest. We put everything down, had some food, and actually took a small nap while listening to the peaceful sound of nothing but the wind. We had now reached an altitude of 3,444 meters, and looking back now, I think the altitude did affect me in some ways.
This hike is a joke. Vamos.
The subalpine forest is more like an open area. It's located at the side of the volcano and it's offering spectacular views of the neighboring Volcan de Acatenango. In this zone, we walked between pine trees, some of them destroyed by fire in the past. Although we were still walking inside fog, we had already passed an altitude level way above the clouds. Not only did this part of the hike offer us nice views, it was generally also the least steep part of the trail, making it a bit easier to finish that last stretch. And so we kept walking, and kept walking, and kept walking, until all of a sudden, the clouds broke and revealed the first view of Volcan de Fuego. I immediately stopped to fly my drone towards Fuego to capture the mesmerizing image of the clouds gently touching this gigantic volcano as they drifted over the mountain forest. It was peaceful and cold. As much as I really wanted to just look at the scenery a little longer, I just couldn't. I was extremely exhausted and needed to lie down. The problem at this point, we still had to find the tent/cabin in which we were supposed to sleep. This took us another hour. Once we finally found it, we stepped inside and laid down. The provided mattresses and sleeping bags are kinda dirty and wet, so make sure to bring your own, even if this means extra weights on your shoulders. We got to the tent at 5 p.m. and somehow managed to keep our eyes open until 7. Eventually, we fell asleep after a 9-hour hike. What I did not yet know at this point, the difficulty of the hike I just finished was nothing compared to what I had to do the next morning. Because I wanted to see the sunrise, no matter what. And soon later, at 3:30 in the morning, I regretted that decision. I was freezing. My stomach problems came back at night, and I really needed some more rest. Rest that I didn't get. At 3:15 in the morning, the alarm went off. In the cold, I assembled my batteries and camera equipment, and 30 minutes later, we stepped out of the tent. The visibility was close to zero, and there was no marked trail that led the way up to the summit. All we could do was following a general direction that seemed about right. Luckily, we could spot some lights above us. Some people started the ascent even earlier, giving us a rough estimate of where to go. As we moved forward and it got steeper and steeper, we saw more and more people turning around because of the steep and intense incline. At some point, I think it was the last 30 minutes before we reached the top, we were walking on pure volcanic sand at an incline of close to 45 degrees. It felt like we made no progress as we pushed forward. The visibility cleared by now and I got excited.
5 more minutes. 5 minutes.
Would I really have a clear view of Volcan de Fuego again? And that even maybe during a picturesque sunrise? That was a thought that kept me going. And just in time, we reached the summit. After an intense 90-minute long ascent to the top. The view? Breathtaking. I was speechless. Every bit of pain and sweat was totally worth it. Shortly before the sunrise, there were about 100 people up on the summit. What I didn't know? The official tours only allow for 10 minutes of picture taking after the sun is up. This really sucked for all the guided tours, but for me, my friend, it was perfect. Half an hour after the sunrise, we were entirely alone on the summit of Volcan de Acatenango. We walked around the crater and did what we initially agreed on doing. We just sat down at the edge of the crater and stared at the Volcan de Fuego as it was releasing ashes and steam. Truly spectacular. 1 hour of total peacefulness, good conversations, and a well-deserved cold beer. Running down the volcano towards the base camp was surely way more fun than hiking it up earlier that day. We grabbed our belongings in the tent and prepared for the way back down. It was a clear, sunny morning which allowed us to stare at Volcan de Fuego and the neighboring Volcan de Agua for a little longer as we descended back from the base camp. Constantly accompanied by some stray dogs, we made very good progress. After about just 40 minutes, we already reached the cloud forest zone. 30 minutes later, we made it back to the parking, hopped into the car and spent 2.5 hours in traffic before we finally got back home again. That, my friends, was a very intense hike. I hope you had found a few things in this video that helped you make a decision, which hopefully is to go and do the hike yourself. It is challenging, but it is extremely beautiful and rewarding if you go through with it. So with that being said, have safe travels, my friend, and I'll see you out there on the road.